Hello, and welcome back to DLA Alternative. It's your boy Brandon, and I hope everyone is doing phenomenal as always. And thank you to everyone who keeps subscribing, liking, and following this journey. And thank you to everyone who keeps killing it and viewing those Mind Flayer theories and When Will Was the Spy Part 1. And yes, as you can tell by the thumbnail and title, we are jumping right back into it with When Will Was the Spy Part 2. And in this one, we are going to go over the arcade scene when we see Will have his first vision, and also when we are introduced to the name Mad Max. And I say Mad Max and not Max Mayfield because we are only introduced to the name at this point in time, and that's very important to this part of the theory. So let's get right into this one, people, because this one has a lot of hints, in my opinion, to what could happen in Season 5, what actually happens in Season 2, and the connection to the characters that are involved in this scene, no doubt in my mind, are going to have influence going into Season 5, and they have had major influence in this show already. So let's get right the fuck into this one, people. Alright, first things first, the very first thing you have to keep in mind is that this is right after the intro scene when we are introduced to Kali, and we really don't know who she is, we just are introduced to her number being number 8. And the only reason I bring that up right away is because if you've noticed some of my other theories that I've called Kali a villain, okay? And in my opinion, I truly think that Kali has a darker meaning in this show and why her character was introduced to the show whatsoever. But as I have been analyzing a lot of these theories, okay, I have been analyzing so much and I have found so many connections to Kali specifically. And no doubt in my mind, I have not figured out exactly why, other than that Kali could be the major villain in this show. However, after analyzing the Mind Flayer in those theories, okay, if you have not checked those ones out, go check those ones out. They get very interesting and they connect to all of this, all right? But my major point is I've been getting major connections to Kali in all of the other theories as well, and I think I have an answer to that and why Kali was introduced right the fuck away in Season 2. The major reason being is that we know the Mind Flayer is the bigger purpose in the show, in my opinion. It's very obvious that this thing is trying to overtake everything in Hawkins and overtake our boy Will and overtake 11 and just everything, okay? But the major thing that I found interesting, okay, is when I started really fucking thinking about it and why Kali could have any influence in this show whatsoever. If you really think about how Season 2 ends up going and ends up playing out, okay, we see that Will ends up getting infiltrated, which we will analyze later in this theory, okay? But my major point is we see Will's journey of him getting infiltrated and then him getting healed and the Mind Flayer coming out of him, okay? And then in Season 3 and 4, we see that Will still has a connection to that Mind Flayer specifically because he gets hints and he gets that weird feeling in his neck, okay? But the major point you have to pay attention to, and I think I have it figured out why Kali is influenced in this show, is that Kali could have been influenced by the Mind Flayer at one point in time and might not have the Mind Flayer in her specifically. That's not what I'm trying to say, but maybe she did at one point in time and now it came out of her, and that's why she has this weird kind of darker side to her. But also that could be a reason as to why we see Will's journey in this season, as to why he gets infiltrated and how we see him act throughout the whole process, and then how he acts after that thing comes out of him, okay? And we get 2 seasons of that, and we kind of see that Will gets quieter and quieter throughout those 2 seasons, and he gets more aggression in Season 3, and then in Season 4 he gets extremely quiet, nervous, and then he really doesn't know how to connect with his closest friends. And Mike being one of them specifically, because when Mike goes to visit them in California, we see that odd connection between Will and him right off the bat. And Mike and him get a lot closer throughout that season because of what they are dealing with and what they have to accomplish, okay? But now at the end of Season 4, we kind of get a little hint that Will is now feeling that shit again, and that Will is very, very fucking nervous being back in Hawkins. And then we even see Mike try to make him feel better that they are going to accomplish this and they will beat this thing. So the major connection to Kali, I think why we have her in this season whatsoever, is what could happen to somebody that had the Mind Flayer in them being Kali, and now it's out of them being Kali, but then 11 and her have this odd connection that we really don't know a lot about, that if it was just a trap or that if she was really trying to help her. But we do end up knowing that Kali tries to end up showing 11 how to use her powers in the wrong way, being with anger and bad memories. And we end up knowing later in the season, and like I said, we'll analyze this with Will, that thing tries to block off Will's happy memories, and that's what keeps him connected to home and keeps him connected to his friends and family. So I think I'm fucking onto something, but let me stop rambling about Kali and let's get right the fuck into this conversation. So let me know your thoughts about that so far. So basically this scene starts off and it's right after we see all the boys trying to scrounge for money in the fucking couch and shit and get quarters and shit. And basically they're all going to meet up at the arcade, all right? And we see them pull up on their bikes and they are all together, Dustin, Lucas, and Mike, and Will is not with them. And we obviously see that right the fuck away because he pulls up in the car with Joyce. And if you watch part 1 of this theory, you would know we talked about a scene involving Jonathan and Will, and it talks about Will's feelings. And it happens at the end of this episode, so this is completely after this scene. But during that scene, you get hints of how Will is truly feeling and how he feels about certain people in his life. And in that scene, he specifically mentioned Joyce, Lucas, and Dustin, that they were treating him differently and treating him like a baby and treating him like something was wrong with him and that he did not want to be treated that way, okay? So that scene was extremely important to start off with because we needed to know how Will was feeling before we even get hints of that in this fucking scene. But we do end up getting a little bit of a hint right here, but not as serious as it was in that scene, and that's why it was important as well. But right when Joyce and Will pull up, okay, they pull up and Joyce is telling him that she's going to pick him up in 2 hours at 9 o'clock on the dot. So obviously it's 7 o'clock on the dot right now if we're talking exact timestamp right here. But my point is right off the bat, you could kind of see how Joyce is treating him, all right? And we do not know this, but we end up hearing in the Owens conversation when he goes to his appointment, all right? And we are also going to analyze that scene as well throughout this theory, but we end up hearing during that conversation between Joyce and Owens that this scene right here was the second episode he has this month, okay? So obviously something happened before this that we do not know about. And this is just a little bit of a hint right here because of how Joyce is acting. She's extremely nervous and anxious, and you could tell that. But my point is Will kind of shrugs it off and he's like, okay, I gotta go, all right? And basically he says that because she's trying to remind him of everything in this scene. She's like, if something goes wrong, please borrow their phone and call me. I will come and pick you up right away, and please do not walk or bike home alone. And that's the point that Will gets annoyed, okay? And that's what you gotta remember is that he gets annoyed at that point and what she says right there. And that's what connects to what happened to him in season 1, okay? And that's why it's important because of that first conversation with Jonathan and Will that we analyzed. In that conversation, they talked about how he's feeling truly and how he feels about people bringing up that situation. So in this conversation, we just get that little bit of a hint right here that what's going to happen later in this season, that Will is going to get extremely annoyed because he ends up getting triggered by what Joyce says about the walking or biking home specifically. That's what snaps him into this conversation. And like I said, that's when he says, okay, I just want to go, and he wants to go hang out with his friends. He does not want to fucking think about that situation. So that's extremely important to Will's character. And Will's character throughout this entire season and this entire show, in my opinion, since he vanished. So that's extremely important. Keep that in mind, people. But this next scene with the Princess Daphne and the Dragon's Lair shit is the hints, in my opinion, and the things that could have some major fucking hints or connections to season 5, because there's things that, in my opinion, connect to season 4 involving Max. And this is before we are introduced to the name Mad Max. We have this as our episode title, but we do not know what the fuck that means just yet. So keep that in mind. It's extremely important. We're getting hints of things before we're introduced to that character's name. And not Max Mayfield, like I said, the name Mad Max is what we're introduced to right here. That's very important. But right away, the scene kicks off and it shows us this game that they are playing. And Dustin is the one that's playing this game, trying to beat someone's score. And we don't know whose score that is just yet. But the scene kicks off and they're playing the game right away. And it shows us that game. And it shows us Princess Daphne right off the bat. And her character is a blonde character wearing this black dress, okay? So keep in mind that she's wearing a black dress and dark colored clothing. That's also very important. And then what she says right here is super important. And super important in a different way than you probably ever thought, okay? Because now that we know how this show has entailed, these scenes matter in such a different way. So you got to keep that in mind as well. But my major point right here is what Princess Daphne says is to slay the dragon, grab the magic sword, all right? And what you would think right away is that this princess is giving this fucking knight advice on how to beat the dragon, okay? And she partially is. But in my opinion, if you turn this shit a little bit upside down and think about it differently, okay? And that's how I've been doing all of these theories. You got to think differently and open your mind. Listen listen to Argyle. But my major point is, people, is if you turn this conversation around, she's basically luring that knight to his demise, okay? And we see that how this game ends up playing out. Dustin is playing that game and his friends are pressuring him to do all this shit, okay? And then all of a sudden he grabs that magic sword, and that magic sword is behind that dragon. So keep in mind that dragon is fucking protecting this sword right here. And this sword is kind of looking like Excalibur to me, and it's embedded in a stone, but it's embedded in a diamond-shaped stone, and a diamond fucking looking stone. So that's extremely important in my opinion. Then obviously, as we know, as this scene continues, Dustin ends up fucking getting burnt to a crisp, and that knight dies, and he dies like a fucking skeleton, okay? But then you see Dustin get pissed, and he kicks that fucking machine, and you see fucking Lucas looking at him, and he tries to make him feel better. And this is the point that now that we know everything that happens in the show up to this point so far, this scene is extremely more important than we ever thought because of what Lucas says right here, okay? Because basically he's trying to make Dustin feel better, okay? And he basically looks at him and he goes, "You just weren't nimble enough, but you'll get there in time," or something like that. And then he says this motherfucking line, and I'm so happy that I reanalyzed all of this shit. He says to Dustin right after trying to make him feel better, keep in mind that until then, Princess Daphne is still mine. And we know how this season and this show ends up playing out. We know Lucas ends up getting the girl being Max Mayfield, okay? And no doubt in my mind, there's more foreshadowing to this than just what happens in season 2 because of the scenario that happens on this game. We know Max ends up getting trapped, okay? And we do not know where she's at. We just know that she was in a lair the last time we saw her, and that was Vecna's lair, okay? But we do not know that for sure if that was actually Vecna's lair, and I'm going to keep saying that, and you'll know that if you watch the Mind Flayer theory, so go check those ones out. But my major point is that this princess, okay, this princess in that game just led this fucking knight to his demise and to his motherfucking death, and he ends up getting burnt to a fucking crisp, kind of looking like Vecna. I know he's a skeleton, but that's kind of what Vecna looks like in a way. He kind of looks like a fucking skeleton made up of those little tentacle things from the Upside Down, all right? But my major point is that if we think about this in a season 5 perspective, that if Max is fucking trapped in this lair herself, okay, or maybe she ends up coming across a dragon or something like a dragon in this fucking place that she's at, and how we see her last in that fucking lair and somewhat being trapped in this fucking lair. We don't know it as a dragon's lair in season 4, but in season 5, we know this show just gets bigger and bigger, people. So no doubt in my mind, this could have a fucking hint to season 5. And a major fucking hint to what happens to Max's character in this show all the way back in season 2, before we are ever introduced to Max Mayfield and before we are ever introduced to the name Mad Max. But like I said, this shit's extremely important, so keep in mind that sword, that diamond, the game, fucking Princess Daphne being trapped, but also luring that fucking knight to his demise, and then also being trapped with a fucking bigger picture being a fucking dragon or a monster, okay? So just keep in mind that there's some major fucking hints to our other characters right involving this game, being Max, being Dustin, and being Lucas most importantly, because what Dustin says right here confirms that Lucas is the top player on this game. And also because of what Lucas just said, basically saying that until then, Princess Daphne is still mine. But what Dustin says right here is he basically fucking shrugs off what Lucas says and he goes, well, okay, whatever, I'm still tops on Centipede and Dig Dug. And then this is when we are about to get introduced to the character named Mad Max, okay? Not fucking Max Mayfield yet, so keep that in mind, people. But anyways, as this scene plays out, our boy Keith from the arcade, he ends up fucking walking up, okay? And he's trying to fucking say, oh, are you sure about that? And Dustin gets instantly nervous and he's like, oh, fuck no, what are you talking about? And then he ends up running up to the Dig Dug game right the fuck away. And that's when we are introduced to the name Mad Max. And then all of a sudden, Will speaks the fuck up and I'm pretty sure he's the one that says her score, okay? And that's all Will really says right here. But he's the one that reads Mad Max's score, okay? And as the boys are getting all up in arms, our boy Keith comes up just to fucking make fun of him, all right? And Dustin and him get into this argument about his acne and shit. But right before that, Mike says something interesting, okay? And it's right after the score is read. He basically says that that's an impossible score to get, okay? And you might be thinking like, oh yeah, it's just an arcade game and she's probably really good at the game, like way better than they are, all right? But the fact that we are introduced to this name Mad Max right here, and then Mike says this line that, oh, that's impossible, okay? In my opinion, this could be foreshadowing that Mad Max is an impossible thing or something like that, or whoever ends up being connected to Mad Max being Max Mayfield, that they could end up accomplishing some some impossible things or impossible scores or things that are impossible. So I don't know if that has a lot of importance, but that line was just quickly thrown in there, okay? And Mike's the one that says that, and Mike kind of is the one that has the hate towards Max throughout this whole season. So that's what sprung my interest about Mike being the one that said that right here. So let me know your thoughts about that as well. But as this scene gets to the most important part right here, this is when Will fucking gets into his trance, okay? Or his warning, like I keep saying. And basically what he hears is he hears thunder outside, okay? And he turns around. But as he's walking to the window, we kind of see a scene like this later on in season 4 and at the very end of season 4. And I'm going to tell you why. Because as he fucking walks up, okay, he sees spores falling from the outside like snow, okay? And this scene, no doubt in my mind, could have some major hints to what ends up happening in season 5 or what's about to happen in season 5. Because right at the end of season 4, we see little Miss Holly Jolly, okay? And she says to her mom, "Hey, Mom, it's snowing outside." And all of those spores are falling, okay? But what's the difference between these two scenes? Not just the fact that it's Will and Holly doing this, okay? The difference between these two scenes is that one is being shown in the upside down. And then later on, all the way in season 4, we see this scene with Holly, seeing this in actual Hawkins. So if you really think about this as a foreshadowing hint to what's going to happen in this show, we see what is happening in the upside down and how the upside down is about to be infected. And that's why I call this a warning. But my major point is that all of a sudden Will tries to turn around, okay, because he sees those spores falling before he gets put into that trance. And then all of a sudden he turns around to ask his friends for confirmation if they see the same thing outside. But as he turns around, that's when he gets snapped into this trance, okay? And then all of a sudden that fucking door opens, all right? And it's kind of leading him to the outside. And you would think like, oh, it's leading him to a trap, all right? But if you think about this as a warning, all right? And if he's connecting to something that is trying to warn him about something, this, no doubt in my mind, shows us that this is a warning and not a trap. Because Will follows that warning and he walks outside to see that storm in the fucking distance. But as he's walking outside, all right, this is why I think he's also connected to something else, but also something else that could be connected to one of his friends. And I say that because there's a little hint to this right here, and let me know your thoughts about this because this is kind of a fucking push. But as he walks outside to this warning, okay, right before we are shown this storm for the first time, look at the Palace Arcade sign, the letters right there. It's blinking, okay? But there are only 3 letters blinking in that sign at most. And those letters are P-A-L, and if you take out the other letters, that spells pal. So no doubt in my mind, this could be a major hint that whatever he's connecting to right here is trying to be a friend and trying to warn him. Because then all of a sudden, as he's walking up, all right, and you see that sign blinking, Will looks extremely scared. And that's extremely important to remember right here because he looks extremely fucking scared at what he's looking at. And then all of a sudden we see the storm in the distance for the first time. We do not see a mind flayer yet. Just keep that in mind. That's extremely important. But take a look at that storm, okay, and look at how it's shaped. It's kind of like a funnel cloud, all right? And it looks like there's a big circle in the middle of it. But there also looks like there's a second circle right to the left of it right here. The major connection, no doubt in my mind, about that being circle and red colored on the inside of it being the lightning or just the color red. No doubt in my mind, we see a connection all the way to season 4 right here in this scene. And the reason being is look at the shape, like I said, it's a circle looking portal from this storm, okay? When do we see a circle portal, people? We see it all the way in season 4 when Max is trying to escape Vecna's lair, people. We see it in the Dear Billy episode when they're playing running up that hill trying to save her life and that music opens that portal. And that's the first time we see a circle-shaped portal being created in that manner. And just take a look at how it looks when Max is trying to run away to escape. It's all smoky around it, and the red color is dispersing into real life color and real life itself. So no doubt in my mind, if you look at that in this scene with Max and then look back at that storm in the distance, that looks like a portal coming from that layer, in my opinion. And we don't see the Mind Flayer coming out of there at this point in time. And we definitely don't see a motherfucking Vecna falling from the sky out of that. So my major point is something is coming from there, but it's coming from what looks like the same fucking layer that we see Vecna's layer in. But like I said, we are not introduced to Vecna at all until season 4. and we are just introduced to the name Mad Max, and then later in this episode we are introduced to Max Mayfield. So no doubt in my mind, people, that scene with Max and Vecna in the circle portal, okay, that circle portal is associated with Max and not Vecna. And that's the major fucking point I think I connected and picked up on right here, is that storm in the distance looks like a circle portal, okay? That portal is directly connected to Max specifically, and it's created by her friends who put her headphones on, and then she ends up listening to Running Up That Hill by Kate Bush, which ends up saving her life because it ends up opening the portal. So the portal and that circle-looking storm right here, in my opinion, is not connected to Vecna. And Vecna is not the one who ends up opening that portal, people. And when that portal opens, Vecna is extremely fucking confused. So no doubt in my mind, I picked up on something. So let me know your thoughts about that as well, because I think that's a big, big, big fucking hint right here. But also real quickly in this scene is, like I said, that diamond-shaped symbol from that game where that fucking magic sword was, okay? We obviously know we have a diamond-shaped symbol in this show, being the Palace Arcade fucking logo, and we see the sign spinning right there. So no doubt in my mind, if you think about that Dragon's Lair fucking scene a little bit differently and a little bit deeper, we see that magic sword in that fucking diamond-shaped stone. And then we already know we have our diamond-shaped logo of the Palace Arcade, okay? But my major question is, and I'm not going to say too much about this, about my thoughts just yet. I'm going to save this for later theories, but I want to know your thoughts. That do you think this Palace Arcade is going to have a major involvement in season 5? And do you think in the Upside Down that this place could have some magic fucking secrets or a magic relic like this sword that could end up beating the bigger picture? And like I said, people, this connection to this arcade is our boys and Mad Max, being Max Mayfield. The connection to the arcade, no doubt in my mind, will have no fucking involvement with Vecna whatsoever or Henry Creel. It makes no sense why that place would have any importance to his character whatsoever. So like I said, the major question I want to know from you guys down in the comments is, do you think this Palace Arcade has any major involvement in season 5? And do you think it's going to have any type of special relic or secret that the boys are going to have to fucking find in order to beat something in season 5? And do you think it's odd that all of these connections have a lot of connections to later seasons and shit we did not fucking even know about for years and years after this episode came out? It's fucking mind-blowing, people, starting to pick up on these things, and we really wouldn't have known these things whatsoever when these seasons came out, so it's extremely interesting as well. But lastly, as this scene ends, okay, like I said, we see Will walking outside and we see him extremely scared, okay? And like I said, I think this is a warning and not a fucking trap at this point in time. And then we are introduced to this storm that looks like it has a portal that connects all the way to season 4 involving one of our characters specifically that I do not want to even say her name, but this portal that ends up having this fucking mind flare coming out of it later in this show. So just keep that in mind as well. But my major point is how this scene ends, all right, is that we just saw Will extremely scared, and then all of a sudden we see the camera pan back to Will, and he does not look as scared in the second time we see him, okay? He looks like he is being mesmerized by the storm in the distance and by that warning he is getting right now. And in my opinion, if he is truly getting a warning from something from the Upside Down or something that's connected to the Upside Down, and if that warning is meant to be a friendly warning like I think it is, then no doubt in my mind, Will is becoming mesmerized by the bigger problem that is in the distance. He looks scared initially, and now he looks extremely just hypnotized by that. And if you really think about how people get kind of hypnotized by something, it's usually by something spinning, like one of those spinning spirals, kind of like that storm in the distance, right? Or I've seen hints of this in a lot of different things, and I'm sure you have too, that sometimes hypnotists use a fucking pocket watch to put somebody into a trance. So that also has a connection to time that we already know in this show has a major fucking involvement, okay? So you really got to think about this shit, people, that Will all of a sudden looks mesmerized by what's in the distance and by this warning he's supposed to be getting. But the most important thing that happens next, and no doubt in my mind is going to have major involvement with Mike Wheeler's character in season 5, is Mike is the one that gets Will out of that trance by using his voice. And we already know that Mike's voice fucking has a lot of influence in this show, okay? And once again, we see another connection to a later season, specifically involving Mike Wheeler's character right here. Because we know Mike's voice is very important because he ends up saving Eleven and keeping her alive while she's trying to help Max get out of Vecna's lair. And Mike's voice connects her to home and what she loves, okay? And in that scene, they were far, far away from Hawkins and far, far away from home, okay? But the reason I say that Mike's voice connects to home, okay, because we know Mike is the heart. And Mike is able to pull him out right here. And we know Will is the one in season 4 that ends up telling Mike that he is the heart. So no doubt in my mind, they use Mike as the heart in this show as a specific fucking reason. And I'm going to tell you why right here. Because if you know the famous phrase, okay, and I hope I don't say it wrong, but the famous phrase that home is where the heart is, okay? So if you really think about this in a deeper perspective, all right, that Mike Wheeler's voice could directly connect people to home. And Mike Wheeler's voice could be the one that keeps people connected to home and keeps them alive and saves the fucking day. So that in season 5 could have a major involvement involving Mike Wheeler's character, and we could see the major involvement in the bigger picture to Mike truly being the heart of this fucking community and of this group. But the most interesting thing and the very last thing Mike says right here is he gets him out of that, all right? Because Mike says right here that, okay, well, it's your turn on D&D, right? And then Mike says after he says, okay, it's your turn on the game, he says, let's take that top score back. And we just saw Mad Max's score that she's the top one on Dig Dug, okay? So no doubt in my mind, I think there's a major hint to season 5 with what Mike just said right here. And how I just said that it looks like Will was scared, but then ends up getting mesmerized by what is actually coming. And the only hint I'm going to give you for later parts in this theory and what happens in this episode specifically and right after they get to school, they are introduced to Max Mayfield people and they end up realizing that that is Mad Max. And what do all of them do in this scenario? They are all mesmerized by what they just saw. Kind of like how Will was just mesmerized by that storm coming, that new intro to a new thing and a new specific problem that is now coming to Hawkins in the Upside Down. So let me know your thoughts, people. It's your boy Brandon, DLA Alternative. I hope you guys liked this one. This was When Will Was the Spy Part 2, and I really hope I'm onto it with these fucking major connections here, people, because there's a lot of symbolism right here all the way back in season 2, and we do not see shit that connects to this until all the way almost to the end of fucking season 4 and halfway through being the Dear Billy episode. So like I said, let me know your thoughts. Keep subscribing, liking, and following this journey, and you guys already motherfucking know, we out.